My name is Mara Lane, and for most of my life, I never truly believed I was the kind of person who'd end up afraid of the dark. I always thought of myself as practical, a planner, someone who could explain away creaks in the night and shadows on the wall with a steady, logical mind. Fear was for people with wild imaginations or those who watched too many late-night horror movies, not for me. Or so I thought, but then life happened. The kind of life you don't see coming, the kind that leaves you raw and restless in a house that suddenly feels too big and much too quiet. The kind that can make even the strongest, most sensible person reach for a bedside lamp at 3 a.m., desperate for just a sliver of comfort. I was never supposed to end up here, alone in this old, slightly run-down cottage on the edge of town. Heartbroken and nursing a list of regrets I kept hidden like bruises beneath long sleeves. But here I am, and I have to admit it, I'm not as brave as I used to be. Especially not at night, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There's one more detail you need to know, one that changes everything. His name is Max. He's a golden retriever. With deep, honest eyes and a heart so big I swear it spills over and fills the emptiness of every lonely room. He's also the only reason I haven't lost my mind entirely. They say a dog can save your life. I never really believed that either, until Max started refusing to leave my side at night. It began about 3 weeks ago, after I moved in, right around the time the insomnia really dug its claws into me. No matter how many times I tossed and turned, flipped my pillow, or rearranged my blankets, sleep wouldn't come. My thoughts, sharp as broken glass, kept me awake long after the world outside had gone still, and every time I tried to roll over, to turn away from the door, or the window, or whatever was making me uneasy, Max was right there. Sometimes pressed up against my back so close I could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Sometimes stretched along my legs, a warm, immovable weight pinning me to the mattress. At first, I thought it was sweet. Then I started to wonder if he knew something I didn't. Last night was the worst so far. The rain battered the roof, turning the world into a blur of distant thunder and slick, shifting shadows. I lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling, watching the dim streetlight filter through the blinds and cast thin stripes across the floorboards. I could hear Max's slow, steady breathing beside me. I could feel the heat of his body against my side. And still, I couldn't relax. It was after midnight when I gave up pretending to sleep and turned over, meaning to reach for my phone and distract myself with something, anything. But as I moved, Max pressed in tighter, his head landing on my shoulder with surprising weight. His eyes blinked open, golden and unblinking, staring into the darkness beyond the bed. Max, I whispered, voice tight. Buddy, you're crushing me. He didn't move. Instead, he let out a low, almost imperceptible rumble, more vibration than sound. My skin prickled with unease. It was probably nothing. Dogs are protective, right? He's always been attached to me, always wanting to be close. But this felt different. It felt deliberate. I tried again, a little more forcefully, shifting to roll away from the edge. Max responded instantly, moving so that he blocked my path. His body was a wall, solid and unyielding. For a moment, annoyance flared in me. I wanted space, I wanted to breathe. But when I looked at his face, I realized he wasn't looking at me at all. His ears were pricked forward, and he was staring straight into the shadows pooling at the far side of the room. I followed his gaze. There was nothing there, just the soft outline of my dresser, the pile of unpacked boxes, the half-closed door to the hallway. But the way Max stared, so tense, so focused, made my pulse race. I reached for the lamp, turning it on with a shaky hand. The room flooded with warm light. Max's eyes flicked to me, then back to the corner. He let out another soft sound, almost a whine, but deeper. I sat up, adrenaline flooding my veins. What is it, Max? My voice trembled, but I tried to sound calm. I looked again, straining to see something, anything out of the ordinary, but the corner was empty. I almost laughed, the fear mingling with relief and a familiar sense of embarrassment. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe Max was just picking up on my nerves. I scratched behind his ears, forcing a smile. You're being silly, buddy. There's nothing there. Max didn't seem convinced. He stayed pressed against me, even as I tried to slide out of bed and walk to the bathroom. He followed, silent and serious, never letting me out of his sight. When I returned, he circled twice and then flopped down so close that I could barely sit without bumping into him. I tried to roll over again, just to get comfortable. And again, Max was right there, refusing to give an inch. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a dog being clingy. This was a dog with a job, a dog on duty. The realization sent another chill through me. What did he know that I didn't? What was he protecting me from? I glanced at my phone, tempted to call someone, my sister, my mom, anyone. But what would I even say? Hey, Max won't let me roll over. Should I be worried? I could already imagine the laughter, the reassurances that he was just being sweet. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just another weird quirk to add to the list of things I'd have to get used to, living alone for the first time. But even as I tried to convince myself, doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. Max had never acted like this before. Back when we lived in the city, he was content to sleep at my feet or on his own bed across the room. Here, in this cottage, something had changed. Something invisible was making my dog act like a sentinel. A silent guardian. I lay awake for what felt like hours, the light left on, Max never once leaving his post. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under, but even in sleep, my dreams were restless, filled with images of shadows moving in the corners, of Max standing between me and something I couldn't quite see. When I woke, gray dawn was pressing at the windows, and Max was still there, head resting heavily on my hip, eyes half closed but alert. I reached out, stroking his fur, feeling the tension thrumming just beneath the surface. Good morning, I whispered, trying to sound cheerful. Are you going to let me get out of bed today? He wagged his tail softly but refused to move until I sat all the way up. Even then, he only left my side when I finally shuffled toward the kitchen, coffee calling me like a lifeline. The kettle whistled. I leaned against the counter and watched Max pad slowly around the living room, sniffing the baseboards, peering into the hallway. He paused at the front door, ears forward, nose working the gap beneath the frame. For a wild moment, I wondered if someone, or something, had been outside last night. I shook the thought away, but as I sipped my coffee, glancing out at the rain-slick street and the trees shivering in the wind, a seed of doubt lodged itself in my chest. Maybe I wasn't being silly. Maybe Max really did know something I didn't. Maybe there really was something to be afraid of in the dark, and maybe, just maybe, my dog was the only thing standing between me and whatever waited on the other side of the night. I watched Max settle at my feet, eyes fixed on the front door. I promised myself I'd pay more attention. I wouldn't ignore his warnings, even if they made me feel foolish. Because sometimes, the things that keep us awake at night aren't just in our heads. Sometimes, they're real, and sometimes, the only thing you can trust is the dog who refuses to let you roll over, because he's right there, watching, waiting, protecting you from a world you can't see. If you've ever tried to convince yourself that nothing is wrong, that the strange heaviness in your chest is just nerves, the flicker at the edge of your vision just headlights from a passing car, then you'll understand how I felt in the days that followed. I wanted to believe Max's odd behavior was just a fluke. Maybe he was unsettled by the move, maybe the new sounds and smells of the house had thrown him off. I wanted to believe it, but the evidence kept piling up. And so did my anxiety. The next night, I did everything I could to tire myself out, a long walk through the drizzle-soaked neighborhood with Max bounding beside me, an extra hour of sorting through boxes, scrubbing down the kitchen counters. I even tried one of those sleepy time teas my sister swore by. But as midnight rolled around, I found myself in bed, staring up at the same cracked ceiling, nerves buzzing like static beneath my skin. Max was restless, too. He circled my bed 3, 4, 5 times, as if searching for the perfect place, but the perfect place was always pressed right up against me. If I shifted, he shifted. If I turned, he scooted closer, until I could feel the rise and fall of his breath on my shoulder. You're being a weirdo, I whispered, not unkindly. There's plenty of room, you know. You don't have to sleep on top of me. He blinked. At me, big brown eyes soft and unblinking, and I felt my heart squeeze with something like love and worry all tangled together. Just after 1 in the morning, I woke from a half-dream to find Max standing over me, body rigid, staring at the bedroom door. For a few seconds, I thought maybe he needed to go outside. But then he growled, a low, rolling sound I'd only heard once before, when a stranger had tried to reach through the fence of my old apartment. Max? My voice trembled. The air felt thick, heavier than the humid summer nights I remembered from childhood. I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. Max didn't look at me. His ears were forward, tail stiff. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight. The hallway beyond the door was utterly still, a black mouth in the darkness. I tried to slow my breathing, listening for footsteps, a creak, anything. The only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock, muffled by the closed door. I fumbled for my phone, the screen's glow a tiny beacon in the gloom. The time, 1:08 a.m. I texted my sister on a whim. Max is acting weird again. Think he's sensing ghosts? A minute passed. No answer. Max growled again, louder, and took a single step forward. I put a hand on his back. He was trembling, just a little, but enough to make me shiver too. I forced myself to stand, bones aching with fatigue and fear. Come on, Max, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, the old floorboards cool under my feet. Max pushed past me, nose working the air, every sense alert that we moved as a unit, me clutching my phone like a lifeline. Max circling ahead, occasionally glancing back to check I was still there. We walked the whole house, the empty kitchen, the closed bathroom, the little laundry room where the dryer gave a low, settling groan as we entered. Nothing. No sign of anyone, nothing disturbed. See? I said aloud, hoping my voice sounded braver than I felt. Nothing here but us. Max sniffed the corners, his tail dropping lower, but the growling stopped. Still, when we returned to bed, he refused to settle until he'd wedged himself along my side, his body pressed so close that when I tried to roll over, I found myself boxed in again, caged by love and by fear. That morning, I woke bleary-eyed and cranky, muscles stiff from a night spent barely moving. Max was up first, already at the window, head on the sill, watching the gray world beyond. I followed his gaze, but saw nothing out of the ordinary, just empty street, dripping trees, the neighbor's cat slinking across a fence. I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched. But it clung to me like cobwebs all day, impossible to brush off. I jumped at small noises, the mail slot clanging, the fridge humming, a distant bark echoing through the drizzle. By late afternoon, my nerves were so frayed I called my friend Cora, desperate for a dose of normalcy. She listened, patient as always, as I described Max's strange behavior, the sleepless nights, the weird sense that something was off. Maybe he's just anxious, she suggested gently. New place, new smells, new routine. Dogs pick up on our stress, you know. Maybe, I said, though I didn't really believe it. I just wish I knew what was going on in that furry head of his. Cora hesitated, then said, if you want, I can come stay a night or two. I haven't seen your new place yet. We'll drink wine, watch something trashy, and you can prove to me your house isn't haunted. I smiled for the first time all day. Yeah, maybe that's what I need. Max was a little less jumpy that evening, but he still watched the windows, the doors, every corner of the room with unwavering focus. When Cora arrived, laughing and hauling a duffel bag and 2 bottles of cheap red wine, he greeted her politely, but never took his eyes off the shadows. Even she noticed, is he always this intense? As she asked, as Max sat at my feet during dinner, eyes flicking between us and the living room archway. Only since we moved in, I admitted. He used to be such a goofball. We tried to distract ourselves with a ridiculous reality show, blankets and snacks spread across the couch. For a while, it worked. Laughter cut through the tension, and even Max settled, resting his head on my lap, but as midnight crept closer, the atmosphere shifted. Cora yawned, announcing she was headed to the guest room. I promised to join her soon, then set about locking up, deadbolt on the front door, chain on the back, checking each window. Twice. Max followed me every step, silent and attentive. When I finally crawled into bed, Max waited until I was under the covers before jumping up and resuming his now customary post, pressed so close I could barely move, body a warm barrier against the world. Max, I whispered, running my fingers through his thick fur. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? He exhaled, a long sigh, then licked my hand before resting his head on my arm. For the first time in days, I drifted towards sleep, lulled by the steady sound of his breathing. It must have been hours later, though it felt like only minutes, when I woke to the sound of a door creaking somewhere in the house. I froze, heart hammering, barely daring to breathe. Max was already up, muscles bunched, hackles raised. He was staring at the bedroom door, eyes blazing in the pale streetlight filtering through the blinds. I listened. Silence. Then, another creak, this time closer. I sat up, every instinct screaming at me to stay put, to call someone, to hide. But Max was already moving, slipping off the bed and planting himself between me and the door, body taut and ready. I reached for my phone, hands shaking, and texted Cora, "Are you up? Did you hear that?" No response. Max let out a soft, warning growl, teeth just visible in the faint light. I placed my hand on his back, grounding myself. I strained to hear, was that a whisper? Or just the wind? My mind raced through every possibility, an open window, a loose shutter, a burglar, a ghost. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the living room. Max lunged forward, placing himself right in front of the door, blocking it completely. I tried to roll over, to get up, but he refused to let me move. He glanced back, meeting my eyes with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. It was as if he was telling me, "Don't stay." I did. I stayed frozen, breath shallow, as the footsteps paused. Then, nothing. The house went utterly silent. Long minutes passed. My phone buzzed. "Cora, sorry, just woke up. Didn't hear anything." "You okay?" I stared at the screen, my heart still pounding. Max finally relaxed, pressing his warm body against me again, sighing deeply as if his job was done, at least for now, but I knew something had happened. Max knew it, too, and as dawn broke, pale and uncertain, I understood that I couldn't ignore his warnings anymore. There were shadows in this house, real or imagined, and Max was the only thing standing between me and the darkness. The question was, would I be brave enough to trust him, even if it meant facing something I couldn't see? If fear has a sound, it's the hush that fills a house after midnight, when every floorboard, every rattle, every creak becomes suspect. That's how it felt the next morning, the silence almost ringing in my ears, even as the sun stretched pale arms across my bedroom floor. It should have been reassuring. It wasn't. Max was the first to move, stretching out of his sentry pose at the door and shaking himself, for bristling and then settling back down. He padded to the window, peering out at the street, his posture tense but curious. I watched him, grateful, deeply, almost desperately grateful, for the barrier he'd become between me and whatever haunted the shadows last night. Cora shuffled in a moment later, yawning and rubbing her eyes. "Did you ever get back to sleep?" she asked, voice thick with sleep. "Barely," I admitted. I hesitated, then lowered my voice. "Did you really not hear anything? Not even footsteps?" Cora shook her head, glancing toward Max. "Maybe it was just the house settling? Old places do that. Or maybe you just had a bad dream?" A reasonable answer. I wanted to believe it. But the look in Max's eyes, wide, searching, alert, told me otherwise. We made coffee and tried to force normalcy. Cora did her best to distract me with stories about her coworkers and dating disasters, but my attention kept drifting to Max, who was patrolling the edges of each room, sniffing at doorframes and pausing to listen at odd intervals. By noon, Cora had to leave for work, promising to check in later. As her car pulled away, I closed the door and locked it with an extra click. Max came to sit by my feet, head tilted up at me. "It's just us again," I told him softly. "Just us and the weirdness." He wagged his tail half-heartedly, but kept his eyes on the door, determined to reclaim my sense of safety. I spent the day searching the house from top to bottom. I checked every lock, every window, every closet and crawl space. Max followed me step by step, never more than a few feet away. In the bathroom, I ran my hands along the old tile walls. In the kitchen, I peered behind the fridge. I even pulled open the attic hatch, sending up a swirl of dust and the unmistakable scent of old cardboard and mothballs. Max barked once at the attic stairs, a sharp, warning sound that made me shudder. I closed the hatch quickly, telling myself it was just the squirrel that sometimes scampered across the roof. But my nerves didn't settle that night. I double-checked the doors and left a lamp on in every room. Max watched from the threshold of the bedroom as I brushed my teeth, his reflection visible behind mine in the mirror. I wanted to laugh at my own paranoia, but I couldn't. "Come on," I said, patting the bed. "If you're going to be glued to me all night, you might as well be comfortable." He leaped up, settling immediately along my side. Again, I tried to roll over, and again, he blocked me, stubborn and resolute. I gave in and lay there, rigid and wakeful, just before sleep finally claimed me. I heard it again, a distant, scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across wood. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. Max's ears pricked, and his head snapped up. He was off the bed in a second, moving to the door, nose pressed against the crack at the bottom. This time, I didn't hesitate. I slipped out of bed, grabbing my phone and a heavy flashlight. Max pressed against my legs as I crept down the hallway, the light trembling in my hand. The scraping sound faded, replaced by a series of soft, almost deliberate taps, 3, then silence, then 3 again. In the living room, I paused, heart hammering. Max stood at the sliding glass door, body stiff, tail rigid. He stared out into the blackness beyond the glass, his breath fogging the cold paint. I raised the flashlight, sweeping the backyard. At first, there was nothing but windblown leaves and the faint glimmer of rainwater on the patio stones. Then, at the edge of the beam, something moved, a shadow, low and hunched, darting behind the hedge. Damn, why blood turned to ice. Max growled, deep and guttural, the fur along his spine standing straight up. I caught my breath, willing myself not to scream. The shadow paused, just long enough for me to make out its shape, a person. Or at least, the unmistakable silhouette of one, moving with a deliberate, slow care that chilled me to the bone. I scrambled for the phone, fingers clumsy with panic. I fumbled in the dark, thumb hovering over 911, but by the time I looked back, the figure was gone. Max barked, loud and sharp. I jumped, nearly dropping the phone. The backyard was still now, empty except for the wind and the dark. Damn, my hands shook as I checked every door, every window. Nothing had been forced. No sign of entry. I called the non-emergency police line, voice trembling as I tried to explain what I'd seen. The officer on the other end listened patiently, told me to keep the doors locked, and promised to send a patrol by in the morning. I hung up, feeling both foolish and more scared than ever. Back in the bedroom, Max refused to settle, pacing the length of the bed, ears trained on every noise. I lay awake, eyes wide, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Every time I drifted toward sleep, the memory of that shadow yanked me back, sweat prickling my skin. At some point, I must have finally passed out. Because I woke to sunlight and the sound of Max whining softly at the window. I dragged myself out of bed and went to look. Nothing. The street was quiet, the world bathed in the gold of early morning. I tried to push the night away, tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe the fear and exhaustion were playing with my mind, but then I found it. Near the back door, in the thin strip of mud that ran along the patio, was a single footprint. Human. Large. Not mine. Not chorused. I knelt, touching it, and Max pressed in beside me, sniffing at the print with a low, uneasy whine. See? I whispered, voice shaking. You were right. All that day, I felt as though I were moving through water, every sense heightened, every shadow suspect. Max refused to leave my side for even a moment. He lay at my feet while I worked on my laptop at the kitchen table, followed me from room to room, whined at the bathroom door if I shut it. When dusk fell, the fear returned full force. I texted Cora, telling her about the footprint. She called me immediately, voice tight with concern. Do you want me to come back? Or maybe you should stay with me for a bit? I can't leave, I said, surprised by my own stubbornness. I won't let someone scare me out of my home. But, can you stay on the phone with me? At least while I check everything one more time? Of course, she said, her voice a lifeline. Put me on speaker. Together, with Max leading the way, I made the rounds. Every door locked, every window latched. Cora talked me through it, made jokes, told me about her dogs. Most embarrassing habit. It helped. Not enough to sleep easy, but enough that night, as I settled into bed, Max immediately claimed his spot beside me, even closer than before. His eyes stayed open long after mine closed, vigilant and sure again. Sometime past midnight, I stirred. The house was silent, but the air felt thick, as though it was holding its breath. Max was up instantly, standing over me, body tense. I reached for him, and as I did, I noticed something, a glint of metal near the window. My heart hammered as I approached. It was a screwdriver, muddy and out of place, sitting on the sill. Whoever had been out there was trying to get in. I snapped a photo, hands shaking, and sent it to Cora with a single word, proof. Max growled, louder than ever before, his body a wall between me and the darkness outside. I curled up beside him, drawing comfort from his warmth, his steadfastness. Sleep came in fits and starts, but I knew, somehow, that Max wouldn't let anything happen to me. Not if he could help it. At by sunrise, I had made up my mind. I wasn't running. I wasn't giving up my home. If someone wanted to scare me away, they'd have to go through both of us and me, and my dog, who was always right there, even when I just wanted to roll over and pretend nothing was wrong. But I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. There was something out there. Something, or someone, who wanted in, and Max was the only reason they hadn't made it. The morning sun offered little comfort. For the first time since moving in, I found myself checking the locks not once, but 3 times before I even considered making coffee. Max, who usually waited patiently for breakfast, was glued to the back door, hackles barely flat, tail motionless. His eyes kept flicking from the window to the door, as if expecting the shadow from last night to return. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally changed. It wasn't just anxiety anymore, it was knowledge. I'd seen the print. I'd found the screwdriver. Someone had been here, and Max had known before I ever suspected. Cora's call came before I could even text her. Did you call the police again? You have to, Mara. I did, I assured her, glancing at the muddy footprint once more, still stark and chilling on the patio outside. They sent someone this morning. The officer said he'd patrol a little more often, but I trailed off, frustration biting at my words. Unless someone breaks a window, there's not much they can do. Do you want me to come over? I mean it, Mara. Her voice was soft but determined. The urge to say yes was overwhelming, but I glanced at Max, who stood as if carved from stone. I think I need to do this myself, Cora. I can't let this, whatever it is, chase me out. I could almost hear her nod on the other end. At least promise you'll keep your phone on you. I promise. After breakfast, I took Max out into the backyard, determined to reclaim a bit of my old routine. The morning air was cool and clear, and Max did his business quickly but refused to leave my side to sniff the fence or chase the usual birds. When I knelt to examine the muddy patch by the door, he positioned himself between me and the open yard, body tense, ears back. There was a strange comfort in his protectiveness. Still, it hurt to think how quickly my new home had turned from sanctuary to battleground. As I stood, I caught my own reflection in the kitchen window, drawn, wary, a shadow of the woman who'd moved in with so much hope. By noon, the tension was grinding my nerves raw. I couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't even distract myself with chores. Every noise seemed amplified, the slam of a car door down the street, the rumble of the garbage truck, even the wind in the trees. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe whoever had prowled around last night had just been passing through. Some lost soul looking for an easy mark. But even as I thought it, I knew better. There had been too much deliberateness in those footsteps, too much patience in the way the shadow had paused by the hedge. Max followed me from room to room. When I tried to close the bathroom door, he whined and pawed at it until I let him in. Even in the shower, I could see his paws waiting outside the curtain, his silhouette unmoving, a silent sentinel. The afternoon stretched long and brittle. I started a dozen things, a load of laundry, a new recipe, a half-hearted attempt to unpack the last of the boxes in the spare room, but nothing stuck. Every time I caught sight of Max's tense posture, the anxious line of his back, I felt fear crawling up my spine again. When dusk fell, I made a decision. "We're not hiding tonight, Max," I told him, forcing false cheer into my voice. "We're taking our house back." He cocked his head, ears perked, as if considering my words. I grabbed a heavy flashlight, set my phone to record, and started a careful circuit of the house, inside first, then out. Max was with me every second, nosing corners, sniffing at windowsills, eyes always darting back to me. The interior was clear. Outside, the air was sharp with autumn and damp earth. The yard was empty except for a couple of raccoons scattering through the shrubs. But when I checked the side gate, I found it swinging slightly open, the latch scraped and battered as if someone had forced it. My stomach tightened. I closed and locked the gate, hands shaking. As we turned to go back inside, Max stopped suddenly, body rigid, nose pointed toward the hedge at the far end of the yard. I strained my eyes, but saw nothing, just wind in the leaves, the long shadows of evening stretching across the grass. "Max. Come," I called, my voice barely steady. He hesitated, then circled back to me, pressing his body against my legs. Together, we re-entered the house, the sense of being watched prickling at my skin. I slid the deadbolt home, checked every window again, and closed every blind. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. That night, I left every lamp burning and put a chair against the front door. Max stationed himself by the bed, back to me, eyes fixed on the hall. Sleep was a distant hope that I must have dozed, because suddenly I was snapped awake by a single, unmistakable sound, the soft, metallic jingle of the back doorknob turning. Max exploded into motion, a blur of fur and muscle as he launched himself from the bed, barking in a way I'd never heard before, ferocious, guttural, determined. I was out of bed in an instant, heart thundering, adrenaline surging. My phone was already in my hand as I ran after him. The kitchen was flooded with harsh lamplight. The back door was shuddering on its hinges, someone pushing, twisting, determined to get in, get away. I shouted, my voice raw. "I'm calling the police." Max flung himself at the door, barking so loud the windows rattled. The pushing stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence, a charged, terrible pause. Then rapid footsteps retreating across the patio. I caught a glimpse of a shadow darting past the window. I hit 911, voice shaking. As I gave our address, told them what was happening. "There's someone trying to break in, please hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice was a lifeline. "Stay inside, stay on the line. Officers are on their way." I pressed my back against the kitchen wall, phone to my ear, staring at the door as if it might burst open at any second. Max stood in front of me, every muscle tight, a low growl rumbling from his chest. It felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes, before the sound of police sirens filled the night. The patrol cars' blue and red lights washed the living room in flickering color. Officers pounded on the door, calling my name, and I let them in, relief and terror making my knees weak. They swept the house and yard, flashlights slicing through the darkness. They found footprints in the mud, fresh, deep, matching the ones from the night before. They found scuff marks on the back door, evidence that someone had tried hard to force it open. They even found a small, battered flashlight half hidden under the hedge, left behind in the hurried escape. The officers were kind, efficient, professional. They told me they'd increase patrols, urged me to keep the doors locked, to install new lights and cameras. They promised to call if they found anything else. When they left, I collapsed on the couch, Max pressing his head into my lap, his whole body vibrating with nervous energy. I stroked his fur, whispering over and over, "Good boy, Max, good, brave boy." For the first time since this all began, I cried, not out of fear, but out of relief and gratitude. Max stayed right there, letting me soak his fur with tears, never moving away. When the house finally grew quiet again, I gathered Max close and whispered, "You saved me, buddy. I don't know what I'd do without you." He licked my face, tail thumping softly. The fear hadn't vanished, not entirely. But it felt smaller, contained by the courage of the dog who had refused to leave my side, who had faced the darkness. So I wouldn't have to do it alone. That night, for the first time, I let Max sleep on the pillow beside me. I didn't even try to roll over, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. I wanted him right there, always at asleep. Finally claimed me, I knew we'd face whatever came next together. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. That it's strange, the things you remember after a night that shakes you to your core. For me, it's the way Max refused to sleep, his body half draped across mine, head wedged firmly against my shoulder. As if to say, "You're safe now." It's the light from the neighbor's porch flickering through the blinds, painting slow-moving patterns on the bedroom ceiling. It's the stillness that finally settled over the house, something so rare in the past few weeks that I lay awake for hours, waiting for the next threat, the next shadow, the next sound, but no one came. Not that night. Not as the early light crept softly across the windows and birds began their cautious song. There was just the comforting weight of Max, my heartbeat slowly falling back into rhythm, the realization dawning that, for now at least, we had made it through. Still, the aftermath is never as easy as you hope. The officers returned in the morning, more formal this time, asking for statements and details. They took the muddy flashlight away, compared the footprints in the garden, and combed the hedge for clues. Their questions were gentle, but I could see the pity in their eyes. A young woman, alone except for her dog, clutching a mug of tea with hands that still shook. Max watched from the threshold, tail wagging as each officer entered and left. He received their scratches and soft words, but never took his eyes off me for more than a moment. He seemed to know that it wasn't truly over, that fear lingers long after footsteps fade and danger runs off into the night. "You're lucky you had him," one officer said, ruffling Max's ears as he finished his notes. A lot of folks freeze in a situation like that. But not this guy. He was ready. I knelt, pulling Max close, pressing my face to his warm fur. I'd be lost without him. The police left behind a sense of cautious reassurance. They said a suspect was picked up 2 streets over, someone found with mud-caked shoes and a pocket full of random tools. They were pretty sure it was the same person, a petty thief looking for an easy break-in. I tried to feel relief, but all I could think about was how close it had come. How thin the line was between fear and safety. Between being a victim and being spared. For the first time, I understood how much of that line had been held by Max, who'd refused to let me face the darkness alone. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls, family, friends, Cora sobbing with relief when she heard the news. I barely remembered what I said to any of them, except for one promise I made over and over: I would never again brush off Max's instincts. I'd trust him, always. After lunch, the locksmith arrived to reinforce every door and window. I watched from the kitchen, Max glued to my side, as heavy deadbolts were installed and new motion lights fixed over the porch. The handyman even showed me how to set up an old security camera I found boxed in the attic, a leftover from a previous, far more paranoid tenant. For once, I didn't mind the paranoia. Sometimes a little fear keeps you safe, but it wasn't the gadgets or the patrol cars that finally brought peace back into my home. It was Max, always Max, silent when I needed calm, alert when the wind rattled the window panes, never asking for anything but a reassuring hand or a quiet word. That night, I sat on the back step, Max pressed against my knee, watching dusk settle gently over the yard. The world felt different. Not perfect, not innocent, but honest. I wasn't unafraid. But I was no longer alone. As darkness fell, I found myself thinking about everything that had changed since Max and I moved in. How I'd come to this house wanting a fresh start, how quickly my confidence had been undermined by shadows and things I couldn't control. How it had taken fear to teach me the value of loyalty, and how it was love that finally brought me through. The days that followed brought a slow, steady healing. I kept my routines, morning walks with Max through the dewy streets, coffee on the porch, music in the kitchen as I finally unpacked the last of my boxes. The security camera blinked its red light over the front door, a silent sentry of its own, but it was Max's steady presence that made me feel truly secure. Max relaxed, too. With each passing day, the tension melted from his body, his playful side slowly returning. He started chasing squirrels again, barking at the mail carrier with friendly bravado, even sneaking onto the couch for naps when he thought I wasn't looking, but some things never changed. At night, when the lights went out and the house grew quiet, Max was always there, right there, curled up against me, warm and solid and absolutely immovable. I'd try to roll over and laugh as I bumped into him, and he'd thump his tail and nudge closer, as if to say, "I'm not going anywhere." One evening, a week after the break-in, Cora came by with dinner and a new set of squeaky toys for Max. She insisted we eat on the floor, picnic style, with Max in the center, basking in the attention and scraps of roasted chicken. "So what's it like?" she asked, nudging my foot, "knowing your dog is basically your bodyguard?" I grinned, glancing at Max as he gnawed contentedly on his toy. "It's like having a shadow that you never want to lose. He's saved me more than once. Maybe more than I'll ever really know." Cora's eyes softened. "You know, you're different, too. Stronger. You're not hiding anymore." Her words stuck with me. She was right. Fear hadn't disappeared from my life, but it no longer ruled me. And as strange as it sounded, I had Max to thank for that. His stubborn refusal to let me give in to panic, his courage in the face of real danger, it changed something inside me. Later that night, as I settled into bed, I watched Max do his usual circuit, check the doors, nose the window, circle twice before leaping up beside me. I tried to roll over, just to tease him, and once again found myself blocked by his solid, reassuring warmth. "Max," I whispered, running my fingers through his fur, "I guess you're never letting me out of your sight again, are you?" He wagged his tail softly, eyes already closing, a small doggy sigh escaping his lips. I laughed, genuine and light, feeling the weight of the past weeks finally lifting from my chest. For the first time, I welcomed the way he pressed up against me, the sense of safety in his unwavering presence. Outside, the night was quiet, peaceful. Inside, I felt at home, not because I'd banished all my fears, but because I'd faced them, one by one. With Max right beside me as sleep tugged at my eyelids, I let myself drift, comforted by the familiar barrier at my back. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever shadows, whatever worries, I knew we'd face them together, and if anyone, or anything, ever tried to break into our sanctuary again, they'd have to get through the world's most loyal guard. I tried to roll over, but my dog was right there. And for the first time, I didn't want to move.